see dead podcasters. Hello and welcome to Backlot 605.
I don't want to be dead.
I am Casey Kelterman. With me is my dead co-host because I'm the only one that can see him, Brian Mensing.
Other people can see me?
No. Every time we have done this, they have not been able to see you. Darren, for all he knows, is just talking to me today.
Oh, yeah. I'm John Cena today. Got it.
Yeah. Casey, what's with the weird pauses where you act like you're talking to somebody?
I hear voices, and they love Fast and the Furious and Linkin Park, and I can't get them out of my head.
All right, well, I guess I'm just going to sit here and eat my donuts.
Gentlemen, for the first time ever, we are welcoming Darren Hines to the podcast. Darren, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Absolutely, Darren. We have met each other through the various South Dakota Sioux Falls film things and movie screenings and all the fun things going on. And here we are talking about M. Night Shyamalan, and that's really where I want to start this podcast. As a movie, I don't even want to just say movie fan, a movie buff like yourself. What's your opinions on Mr. M. Night himself?
Well, I haven't seen all of his movies. There's a couple that I haven't seen. I didn't see the two movies that came before Sixth Sense, and I didn't see
Nobody saw those two.
Yeah, I know. Apparently, Rosie O'Donnell's in one of them. I haven't seen The Visit, and I haven't seen the one with Will Smith and his kid.
After Earth.
After Earth, I haven't seen that, but
no one saw that besides Will Smith and his kid.
Yeah, that's about the time they stopped taking M. Night Shyamalan's name off of movies. Yeah. But for good reason, because he's kind of got like a reverse bell curve of quality. Like he started out red hot with The Sixth Sense, and then the next few movies were still pretty good and slowly declining in quality until he kind of bottomed out, and then came back a bit with Split and Glass. And now it kind of looks like he's trending downward again with Old, in my opinion. So I like him. I think he's a great filmmaker, but I think somebody told him he was a genius, and it went to his head, and it kind of affected the way that he made movies. He was touted as the next Spielberg, and he kind of ended up as the next George Lucas. He has troubles with. He's great with the technical aspects of filmmaking. I mean, he does amazing camera work, but as far as like writing dialogue for characters, yeah, he's great with the concepts, but not so much like making them realistic, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he needs a co-writer or two.
Yeah.
Or at least needs to do one more pass with his scripts, where I think most of them feel like a first draft.
Yeah.
Like some of the ones we've even talked about, they feel like a first draft. This is maybe the biggest exception to that, as many would consider this to be his magnum opus, the big one when you talk about M. Night Shyamalan, the one that really started everything. It's not his first film, but really started that Shyamalan formula of you're expecting a twist, you're going to have some great performances, you're going to have some weird dialogue from kids especially. Mm-hmm. That's where it started here, 1999. So this Sixth Sense, and that's the movie that we are talking about here in our final episode in our M. Night Shyamalan series, kind of going full circle from the decline, the return, and now kind of the beginning with his entire filmography here with this one here. Yeah. So we're go ahead.
I was going to ask, since you obviously were not old enough to go see this in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
You were way not old enough here. When was the first time you had the opportunity to go see to experience The Sixth Sense?
Probably right after it left theaters, unfortunately for me. And we'll talk about that. I have a whole story with The Sixth Sense, and watching it again this time as an adult. Some of those same childhood fears that came about because of this movie are still present. I probably watched it when I was 6-7 years old.
Ooh.
Your parents are demonic.
Probably about Haley Joel Osment's age that he's in this movie. Yeah. Well, this is one of the huge movies of 1999, and my parents were. I vividly remember this. We're at my aunt and uncle's house, and they rented The Sixth Sense from Blockbuster Hollywood Video, one of those. And so everybody sat down as a big family, and we're gonna watch The Sixth Sense with Mr. Bruce Willis and a kid who talks to dead people, and not realizing that a 6-year-old should not be watching this movie.
But it's got kids in it, so it's got to be kid friendly, right?
Yeah.
And it's PG-13. That can't be that bad.
right? And it definitely borderlines that PG-13.
Bruce Willis does say the S word.
If Bruce Willis would have been able to get a little bit more John McClane, it would have been rated R easily.
All right, so let's not waste any more time. We're gonna get to the Sixth Sense here in the second half of the show, but we gotta, of course, start off with the box office numeros and the news. So the box office, kind of a surprising top 5 here that we got going on.
Are you sure?
I think it's a little surprising.
Oh well.
I was surprised. Yeah.
So all right then, Casey. So then, what's the big surprise?
Well, I think the number one staying number one and a certain movie not even in the top 5 are the two big surprises to me in this.
Yeah.
So, you want me to do the box office? Oh, I usually do the box office. I don't know what I'm talking about. I was ready to throw it off to you. I'm sorry. I don't know how my own the show even works anymore. We're 146 episodes into this, and I forgot how we do things. Apparently,
we're going like we got dead air, and I'm like,
apparently we're on a podcast right now. I forget how to do it. Number one though, hey, Free Guy. This is why it's throwing me off because that movie's in the box office still. $18.79 million for Mr. Ryan Reynolds. Still number one at the box office.
Because it's Ryan Reynolds. It's something new. It's something different.
It's something not on a streaming service.
It's something not on a streaming service, and it's actually really enjoyable no matter what you want to try to boycott it for there, Casey.
It might be. I will never watch this movie.
It's actually pretty good.
We're going to have a Ryan Reynolds month, and we're going to make him watch it.
This and R.I.P.D. Hey, oh, no. Hey.
Yes!
If you're going to do a Ryan Reynolds month, you could do a lot worse. But yeah, it's actually a pretty enjoyable movie. As far as how surprising it is, I would say it's like the most surprisingly good movie since like the Lego movie. I mean, nobody was expecting that to be any good, and it turned out to be pretty clever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's definitely aspects of this movie that you could definitely tell that, like, if Ryan Reynolds would have been able to really borderline either the PG-13 or skirt it very, very much so, or if this would have been, an R-rated movie, this would have been even better, to be honest. I think with it being a PG-13 aspect of the movie, whatever, they were being a little reserved with a few things and whatnot, and you can kind of feel that in Reynolds' dialogue and just his delivery, because you could just see it in his face. So it's like, I know that there's things I want to do and say, and I can't.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like again, for something that's unique, we haven't had something like this and whatnot. I enjoyed the absolute premise of this here. I think that the cast members had a very good chemistry about them. Overall, I think it's funny that we have Ryan Reynolds and Taika Waititi in a movie and they never actually share screen time together. But overall, honestly, Casey, as much as you want to think that this movie isn't a movie, I think you probably get more enjoyment out of it than you think you would.
If anything, you'll appreciate the They Live references.
Yes.
We'll never know the answer to that question. I am boycotting Free Guy forever. No, I'll probably eventually watch it. But a movie that I guarantee I will never watch is our number 2 movie, Paw Patrol the movie. Hello, $13 million here. Opening weekend for Paw Patrol the movie. Surprisingly, it took this long to get a feature-length Paw Patrol movie in the theater, but it's still pretty popular if I'm not mistaken. Paw Patrol.
Yes, it is. As somebody who's got 6-year-old twin boys, Paw Patrol has been in my house. It still occasionally pops up in my house here. I'm luckily having my kids haven't found out that there is such a thing as a Paw Patrol movie yet. Because they probably would have been asking for it by now.
Well, then you can shut off Space Jam: A New Legacy and watch Paw Patrol the movie on repeat.
They actually haven't asked for that for a couple weeks now. Wow. So I know I'm actually kind of semi-impressed by that.
If I'm not mistaken, this is also on Paramount Plus.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why
I'm gonna have to sign up to get the Paramount Plus to watch the Paw Patrol movie, I guess.
That's not what I was gonna say. What I was gonna say is the wonderful little task that I gave myself for the year, Casey. This falls in line with that. So this is just one of the ones of this week that I haven't gotten around to watching. And thanks to Derek for pointing it out to me. because I was giving him crap because he's like, I'm not going to watch this movie. I'm like, oh, why not? Is there going to be a new release in theaters you're going to miss? He's like, it's on Paramount Plus, so it falls in line with your little task. I'm like, son of a bitch.
What's the task?
Pretty much all like the original, like the stuff going to like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Apple TV, Paramount, Shudder. There's been like one on Peacock kind of thing, whatever. But like all those, pretty much the new releases I can try to get myself onto. I'm at like 240 for the year or something like that.
Wow, and that's usually not the best content.
There have been some good gems, but
I know.
And then Brian has to sit through 3 Kissing Booth movies because he hasn't seen the first 2 to watch the third one.
Well, yeah. So, like I told him, it's like we had like Don't Breathe 2 that came out this week and whatnot. I'm like, well, before I can watch Don't Breathe 2, I need to watch the first one. And yeah, the Kissing Booth 3 was out on Netflix, so I had to get through the first 2. So just to watch 2 movies, I had to watch 5.
Brian, yeah, I know I made a joke at the beginning of the show that you were dead, but after watching 3 Kissing Booth movies, how are you still alive?
Why are you still alive?
They did remind me a lot of early 2000s, like teenage rom-coms.
Having watched like 10 minutes of the first one, I was like, nope, never again. Why is this a thing?
Have you at least spared yourself the option of watching all of the Hallmark movies that come out?
Oh yeah, that was
Lifetime.
Not no. Dude, if I do that, that's all I would be doing.
Yeah.
Like, Lifetime, it's like, 52 movies a week.
I know.
So maybe at some point here in the next week or so, I'll be able to say, hey, this was a Paw Patrol movie.
It's probably exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
Who knows?
A long form episode of Paw Patrol.
Yep. Yeah. Number 3, though, let's go to Mr. Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Emily Blunt. $6.23 million. Jungle Cruise staying in that number 3 spot from last week. Only a $3 million drop. Again, I think the big story with the rest of the box office here is this movie and another movie that's not in the box office, and how the 2 streaming services went about presenting both of these movies. The other one being The Suicide Squad, not being in our top 5.
Right. I thought you were talking about something else.
What's the other one not in there?
Reminiscence.
Oh yeah, that one obviously didn't even crack. Now you actually got me curious. I'm going to look that up actually.
Where that even ended up at?
The movie that's ironically been forgotten by everyone.
Mm-hmm. Is that one? That one's streaming somewhere too, isn't it?
HBO Max.
It's a WB HBO Max dual release.
Yeah, well, I watched it last night. It's okay.
That's all that's the most positive thing I've heard about it. It's okay.
It's not actively bad in my opinion.
And that's where I really want to go, because obviously I'll run through the rest of the box office, and then we'll talk about Brian's shock reveal of how much money this movie did not make.
Reminiscence worldwide, approximately 5
million.
5 total worldwide. Yeah, 2 for domestic, 3 for international.
Wow.
Opened at what, like 7? 8 maybe. Jeez.
This is its opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was saying this is opening weekend and whatnot. Which okay, not to diverge from Jungle Cruise and whatnot. And is it a great movie? No, but again, it's a relatively original IP, interesting idea. We don't get very film noir type films and whatnot. Like, I'm actually kind of sad that this isn't doing better, just because it's different.
And that's kind of where I want to go quickly with this conversation of with Jungle Cruise and Suicide Squad and Reminiscence being on the HBO Max versus the Disney $30 thing. Mm-hmm. Disney's still making pretty good money in the box office with like Jungle Cruise and Cruella and doing that
because people don't want to pay that $30.
They don't, and if they do, that's $30 straight to Disney's pocket at that point. If someone does pay for that, and people were still doing that, especially for Cruella. So that makes me wonder what's HBO's strategy going forward with Warner Brothers movies. Are they going to continue this trend after this year? I don't see it happening after this year of doing movies that they plan for theaters and then playing them on the streaming service, because especially with a lot of their big properties, they're hitting big first weekend and then a huge drop in the subsequent weekends. And now we're finding here with the Suicide Squad with its third weekend out, it's not even in the top 5.
Yeah.
It's number 6.
Yeah.
Number 6. Which once we get through the top 5, I have an interesting thing to add to the reminiscence thing that I just happened to pull up here.
All right, let's run through the top 5, the rest of it really, really quickly here. Don't Breathe 2, 4 million. 5 million at number 4, and then RESPECT Respect, $3.81 million at number 5. Brian, what was your tidbits on?
I will say at some point here I do need to see this, or for the sake of respect, because I think it generally looks good. I think Jennifer Hudson's doing a fantastic job, and I want to see that. Okay, so for wide release films, or at least semi-wide release films, for this weekend, there were 4 wide releases. Only one of them hit the top 5, and that is Paw Patrol, which had, like you said, is a dual release on Paramount Plus. So, I mean, at least for the sake of Paramount, it wasn't too hard hitting. And I think part of that is because some people are probably like, I don't want to sign up for Paramount Plus, so I'm going to just go take the kids quick to go see the movie and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
But what made me curious, so I wanted to look up Reminiscence. Reminiscence took 9th place in the so at least made top 10. But the Lionsgate, The Protege with Sam Jackson, and The New Lighthouse by Searchlight Pictures took 7th, 8th, and 9th place. So the fact that, and Lionsgate and Searchlight obviously we're not talking about dual releases. We're not talking about other places, whatever the case is. So do we look at like The Protege and The Night House as like just bad marketing?
Kind of.
Just something.
I hear The Night House is good, but from what I've heard, like Protege, I've seen the trailer many times, and it just seems like the kind of movie that just kind of slips in and out of theaters with nobody paying any attention.
Well, and I think it's one of those things that again, this isn't to knock us having a female-led action movie kind of thing, whatever. But I think, especially with the success of like Atomic Blonde, for example, and even us going into like Black Widow or anything like that, now I think everybody wants to make that female-led action movie, and we're getting we might be hitting that point where it's like, okay, well, if I want to see that, well, then I could just go home and watch Atomic Blonde, kind of thing. If they feel like there's a similarity to the story and whatnot, like at this point now, that we are getting these female-led actions, that we need to give us a good story in the process,
and not rely on just saying, "Hey, look, John Wick," but with a female. It's like, okay, it worked for Atomic Blonde. Let's not try to have lightning in a bottle strike twice.
Isn't that the plot of Gunpowder Milkshake?
Mm-hmm.
More,
and that's where I'm like, these studios with these kind of action movies that are not based on IPs. Yeah, you can't rely on the John Wick name for forever to be attached to them. Hey, it's this but John Wick and this but John Wick. It's like that's what happened in like the 90s. It's Die Hard, but with this, Die Hard with that. It's like you can't rely on the same formula for too much longer. Also, right?
Was there any hype behind The Protege? I mean, did you hear about it a month before it came out?
Well, the only thing I really saw for it was a couple of trailers, probably on TV and whatnot. Otherwise, it was the trailers I was seeing in front of the films I was watching.
Yeah.
So
maybe it might have done better if it had been promoted more, but I think this is just one of those low budget things where if they make anything back, they're happy.
And I think this is kind of the trend that the box office has been going for a while, is that we're going to see the big movies are going to continue to be big, but these smaller movies are just going to die at the box office. And that's where I think you need to have something like The Protege or Reminiscence on HBO Max, where they're going to probably get a lot more eyes on it via that route compared to trying to compete with Free Guy, Jungle Cruise, Paw Patrol the movie even.
Well, I don't want to think about how much Reminiscence much of cost, because that looks like a very expensive movie.
There were at least a couple of times where it did feel like the especially like water effect CGI kind of thing was a little like maybe they could have got another Passover on it, whatnot. But I agree though, especially with like some of the wide shots and the shots of the city and stuff like that, the work they had to do for the water work and whatnot. that was one of the things I thought about. I was like, I play a game on my Xbox that looks like it has better water effects than this.
Also, I don't even know that was all that essential to the plot.
But that was one of the things that I honestly I thought was that I liked the social commentary they were giving the fact for global warming and something like that. But if you would have taken that out of the film, you still could have had a futuristic film noir and still been successful at making that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, should we move on to the news?
The news. The one little bit of news, because there really was. We blew all the news last week.
We had too much news last week. We only get one this week.
Right. So, and this has been confirmed, Casey. I saw the rumor.
This is locked and loaded, ready to go.
Locked and loaded. Good. I'm okay with this here. For the sake of the news, we've got Anthony Mackie to return as Captain America for Captain America 4. So, I'm okay with this here. And, we essentially were pretty much given, knowing that this was going to be a given with the way the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier was. So we already know what our Captain America is going to look like and all that stuff and whatnot. But absolutely pass the torch to Anthony Mackie. I think he's a fantastic actor, and I think he's definitely going to hold well and continue this along with in the MCU.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this was a foregone conclusion since the end of Endgame that, hey, next phase that we're moving on, the next Captain America movie you're getting, Anthony Mackie's going to be Captain America.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and I think that's all that series really... I enjoyed Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but again, it was literally a series to show that, hey, this is the new Captain America. This is where he gets his suit, and this is how he and Bucky's relationship grow from where it's been before.
They lost them.
And so necessary. I don't know if that TV show is really necessary, but I think it kind of eases people into the new phase of Marvel. Of, hey, you might still get some lingering things from Phase 1, but we're moving on. We're moving forward. Hey, we have a new Captain America. He's going to be leading our new Avengers. It's a character you already know and love with Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie's character. So I think this is a great choice, and I think it's just going to come down to how many Marvel movies are we going to get a year? Is this Captain America movie going to feel different than the TV show that we got of him as Captain America? I think you need to. That's something Marvel, I think, needs to find the difference between TV and movies still, and making the movies feel really big and the TV shows maybe more character based. Which I do say Captain America or Falcon and the Winter Soldier was pretty well character based and some bigger stakes in it as well.
Well, and I think too, for us getting another Captain America and whatnot, and the series definitely felt like they were attempting to try to do a little bit of a Jason Bourne kind of atmosphere to it, like they kind of tried to do with Black Widow. But I mean, I would have to say is that of all the original Captain America movies, the Russos are the ones that put out the best Captain America movie.
Oh yeah.
And to find somebody who can helm the next Captain America that's not going to underwhelm us either, at least give us something at least similar or on par or something to that effect, so we don't feel like, that Anthony Mackie's going to get shafted as the Captain America, to be honest.
Yeah, and again, that's one thing. I don't know who they'll pull out of maybe the existing Marvel canon of who's going to direct this, or if they'll go with someone completely new. Mm-hmm. I do expect it'll probably. I would go out on a limb and say it's. I don't know who you would bring back if you would bring back anyone, but I'm gonna guess it's gonna probably be a black filmmaker that'll helm this, and that's kind of like that's a direction I want to see them go with Captain America and further explore that. In whatever year it's going to take place in the Marvel universe, but like 2022, 23, when this comes out, I would like to see, kind of everybody's reaction to a black Captain America, and then like the history that they set up in the TV show as well, playing into that too. So I don't know. I think that's something that's probably to be expected out of this movie.
Yeah,
I think that would be a good way about it, and plus, especially if they're leaning into the culture, because all the Louisiana stuff in Falcon and the Winter Soldier was literally based, kind of wrapped and based around Anthony Mackie being from Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So I think, if you definitely had somebody who is understanding of his background and the culture of where he comes from and whatnot, I think will only make that character that more robust.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like Casey Clemens or Avi DuVernay or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. That's it for the news. That's all we got going on this week. Just some big Marvel news because, hey, we never talk about Marvel on this show at all.
Nope. I never bring it up.
So from one MCU movie to another, we're going to talk about The Sixth Sense now, right? That's the movie that started it all. Haley Joel Osment's power is he can see dead people. He's going to see Tony Stark everywhere he goes right now. But no, let's jump into it. The Sixth Sense, 1999, one of the greatest movie years ever, and this is just one of the movies that really is a part of it. And I mean, we talked about it when we talked about The Matrix too, how big 1999 was, and it's like it seems like every big movie was hugely culturally significant of that time, whether good with like The Matrix or The Sixth Sense or bad with The Phantom Menace. It was still culturally significant that we were having this many movies come out in a single year that had that much impact on just culture in America, period.
Right. I did pull up just for the sake of curiosity here, because like you said, 1999 was a huge year for movies, right? This is an August release, and total override worldwide, this made $672 million on a $40 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
Which should be noted that, back in 1999, movies released in August were basically movies that they were just dumping. They would release big movies from Memorial Day until the end of July, and then everything else is like just a lull until it's time for like Christmas and Oscar movies, and then another lull until it's time for summer movies again. So this, debuting and making as much money as it did was a sensation in 1999 for August.
And this would be one of those things where it's like, M. Night gets a movie, gets a decent cast, a decent budget, and he ends up getting dumped in a bad month, and all of a sudden he's raking in almost $300 million for the sake of just domestic alone, and then there goes the ego.
At a time when $300 million is about like $450 million in today's money. So,
right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is, like I said, it's one of those culturally significant movies that everybody's talking about the twist. The twist has been mocked in other movies and other pop culture references for years and years and years.
Robot Chicken.
Lonely Island.
Didn't Scary Movie spoof this too?
Oh yeah. Scary Movie 3, I think. Mm-hmm. They did a lot of, like, half of their movie was a spoof of Signs. But yeah, this obviously this was on the poster, I think, as well, for one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I mean pretty much after this came out, everybody, and it's one of those things that call it mocking, call it parodying and whatnot, but it was one of those things that it's one of those movies where it has such an impact and whatnot. You almost couldn't, like, if you were going to make anything remotely comedy in the horror genre or whatnot, you could not touch on this, because at that point somebody would say, well, why didn't they then at that point? It almost felt like it was too much, but at the same time too, if they didn't, people would have been like, it's one of the best ones. How could you not do that one?
Mm-hmm.
Be like if they made it a few years later and skipped the Blair Witch.
Right.
It's just that iconic of a horror film and a film in general. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange, like, again, with how many movies came out in 1999, how many great ones. Like you said, The Blair Witch is one that was mocked and parodied for a very long time. The Matrix has been parodied. It's still being parodied today in freaking space, the new Space Jam. Like, so again, it's kind of crazy. American Pie was 1999, and that was, again, parody for years and years and years. It's kind of crazy, again, how many movies just had that much of an impact of our zeitgeist in America, and this being a huge one, again, with what a twist with M. Night, something that is literally like every time you're going to go watch an M. Night movie, you're asking the question, even if it's not going to be present in the movie, what's going to be the twist?
Yeah,
he stopped doing it for a long time, and he's still really. I mean, they're describing what happens in Old as a twist, but it's just a logical extension of the story. It's not really even a twist. So it's just,
exactly.
People are like forcing the narrative. People are
It's
forcing the
because-
narrative into it, saying that he has a twist in every movie, but he stopped doing that like after Unbreakable.
I don't know, the village.
The Village, yeah. But I
The
don't think
Village, he tried to do a twofer, and it didn't work for either.
Well, I don't think that there was a big twist in Signs. I mean, there's something surprising that happens, but that's not necessarily
Agreed.
a plot twist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I don't. There to me, there is no quote unquote twist in Signs.
Yeah.
There is definitely in this one here that is what set the staple for it too.
Yeah.
As somebody who rewatched it as an adult, because probably as a kid you weren't paying attention, Casey. But as an adult, when you watch this for the first time, did you catch all the Easter eggs and all the things that made you realize what was happening until the execution?
Oh,
Of the twist.
For me, like the two big twists in cinematic history that I've just grown up with and have just known forever is Darth Vader is Luke's dad.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis is dead in The Sixth Sense.
Well, what I'm saying though is in The Sixth Sense, before you get to that, you realize he's dead. Did you pick up on the little things throughout the movie that basically allude to that before it actually is given to you? Because that's one thing I do love about this movie that I don't think M. Night has been 100% successful in duplicating, is being able to lay out the Easter eggs throughout the entire thing to be able to say, basically, like we made kind of mention in like Lady in the Water, is that he just basically flat out tells you everything. In this here, he literally starts giving you everything all the way up to that point, but unless you know what you're looking for, he was telling you, but he wasn't verbally telling you, kind of thing.
That's always been one of my biggest positives with The Sixth Sense is I always grew up with knowing that, hey, Bruce Willis is dead the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And so watching it through that lens, I'm like, this movie still works even if you know the twist. And I think that's the biggest thing about this movie. If you don't know the twist, it's going to work great. If you do, you're going to pick up on all that stuff of, oh, he's already dead here. That's why he's not talking to the mom. That's why his wife is not talking to him at the dinner table. That's why a lot of these things are not happening. That's why he can't open the door to the basement. So you pick up on all those things. And I think that's one of the biggest successes M. Night has, is not only pulling off the twist, but in subsequent rewatches, the twist still works because everything he planned out before then is so tight and so and works just so well in this movie.
Now, Brian, did you know the twist before you saw this for the first time?
I did not, but that's also partly because of the way that they marketed this movie. It really it does not allude to that at all, other than just that it's a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever that's working with a kid who claims to be able to see dead people and whatnot. So when I saw this in the theater, no, that was one of those ones where I went, holy shit. But it's the subsequent, it's one thing I do love about this movie too, is those subsequent views. So like, okay, now that we know what the ending is, being able to pick up on those little things up throughout there. Because like one thing's like I make mention, Casey, is like the color red. The color red is specifically used in this movie because anytime that there is a physical interaction with a ghost, whether it be Willis or not, it deals with red. You know, the other big one that, you know, I didn't notice right away, but it's one of those ones that if you go back to rewatch and whatnot, is anytime that there is any interaction, you know, with Willis or anybody or anything like that, if it's not color red, nothing moves. He is, you know, completely not having to be worried about bumping into anybody. Or like, for instance, like when he said he goes to visit his wife at the restaurant and whatnot. He doesn't pull in the chair. The chair is already open and he's just able to come sit down. You know, nothing has to physically be moved because he can't physically move it. The only things that are able to be moved or anything that are those color reds. So, you know, it's those little things that it's just, I applaud being able to go back and rewatch those to be able to pick up on those little things.
Well, again, even when when Bruce Willis's character travels anywhere, you don't see him opening a door to enter a room. You don't see, like, especially with the basement, you see him reach in his pocket to get the key. Next thing you cut to is just him in the basement.
Yeah.
Of just that straight cut of we didn't even see him open the door. He's just now in the basement.
Yeah.
It's again, probably the most visually interesting M. Night movie is this one here because of how many things he pulls off so incredibly well in this. And again, the performances really are what hold this movie down to having this big supernatural element to it and a big twist, but it's so grounded in just characters that you love and great performances throughout this entire movie. It's like that's what makes this movie still work 20 plus years later.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, some of those performances, especially towards the end, like the dad who was watching the video of his daughter being poisoned, and the camera's just focusing on him as his like world falls apart and his heart breaks, and that's amazing. And Toni Collette in that last scene, oh my, the acting in this movie was so fantastic.
Toni Collette should have got an Oscar for that scene in the car.
I think she was nominated.
Toni Collette should have won an Oscar years and years ago.
I was waiting for Casey to go. She should have got one for Hereditary.
She should have gotten one for both. Yeah. I mean, just since we are talking about them, we'll jump into the Oscars really quick. Nominated for Best Picture, nominated for Best Actor, Haley Joel Osment, Best Actress, Toni Collette, Best Director, Screenplay, and Editing.
Oh, they nominated him for actor instead of supporting, huh?
Mm-hmm. Supporting actor.
Oh, okay.
Actor in a supporting role.
Say, sorry. Usually they nominate kids for supporting actor, even if they're the lead. So they were still doing that back then. Okay.
Yeah.
Because because kids can't win. The main.
Yeah, exactly. Like
because they're like, that kid's not going to beat the guy that's been acting for 35 years. Screw that.
Yeah. Like Linda Blair was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for The Exorcist. I mean, come on.
But let's start with Haley Joel Osment, because for me, like, again, we talked about this previously in the M. Night series here, how great of performances he pulls out of kids. And obviously this is the peak of that. This is the greatest performance that he has pulled out of any child actor in any of his movies. And for my money, I think this is one of, if not the greatest child performances of all time. I think Haley Joel Osment is just electric on the screen, holding 100% of his own against Bruce Willis and Toni Collette in this movie. I think he's really the anchor of this movie, where Bruce Willis can pull off a really good performance, believable performance. Toni Collette's still pretty young in her career, but still being able to obviously hold her own and pull off those dramatic things. But then Haley Joel Osment, to be able to stand up to that and pull off the childlike innocence that he still has in him is just truly remarkable in this movie. I think he's just so damn good at being this kid that we all know and relate to and had as a classmate, or maybe were him as as a kid in school, kind of being the outcast in a way, and then having this big secrets and being able to the iconic scene of "I see dead people." It's like, that's such a hard line to pull off, and he does it so well in this movie. He's so great in this movie.
Yeah, I would say that it's one of the great child performances and one of the great performances of all time. The only child performance I think I've ever seen that I thought was better was Tatum O'Neal in Paper Moon. But yeah, he is extraordinary. I mean, and this was like his feature film debut. I mean, I think he was in a television show before this, but for somebody to just come out of the blocks and be this good, it's amazing.
Well, yeah, and I agree. In the same instance of like when we were talking about Signs and having Abigail Breslin, basically the first thing that she had before this was a commercial. To be able to, it's either one of two things here. Number one, whoever does his casting is a great casting director, but then also to be able to find that person, and then be able to get a performance like this. I mean. I completely agree. I mean, you look at this and like this, in the same instance of like we said about, John Wick movies and everybody trying to be a John Wick movie, that's a gold standard that has basically been created. And I think especially for like child performances, this is one of those ones that I would deem as like a gold standard. Like, this is what you would need to shoot for if you want to be that damn good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and again, it's one of those child performances I still think is really underrated for a lot of people. If they don't bring it up as some of the great performances of the last 20, 30 years, I think Haley Joel Osment should be in that conversation for this movie. I think he is just incredible in this, and that's not even taking away from Bruce Willis in this movie. Bruce Willis is just really, really great at being kind of this personable dude who's going through his own struggles while also pulling off, hey, I can relate to kids really well and kind of dig into their psychology as well. And that's something like, I don't know about you guys, I would not expect that from Bruce Willis.
No, I was going to say it's a big departure from where his persona was at that time. I mean, he's coming off of I think he had made the second or third Die Hard movie by now. And he was just this big action star, kind of like a lesser version of a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone type. And for him to be playing this child psychologist who's like specializes in subtlety is a huge departure for him. I mean, he's played roles like this since, but I mean, this was like, it almost seemed like stunt casting at the time, but he nailed it.
Well, you say that, and that's basically what people were talking about when he was in Die Hard, though. Too, he bucked the horse a little bit there when people were like, the guy from Moonlighting is not going to be able to be an action star.
True.
So then we get the guy who went from Moonlighting to Die Hard to being this very somber and we're so used to Bruce Willis gun-toting, yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. Like, I don't think he knew that there was multiple octaves and volume level that he could have done in this. And I think that was done on purpose because, again, anytime we have anybody who is of any sort of ghost related into this film and whatnot, they're not over the top. They're not, this isn't like your typical jump scare, horror movie with ghosts and whatnot, where the ghosts are screaming at you, everything like that. Everybody's cool, calm, and collected, and everything like that. And I think it works to the fact that he is a psychologist who doesn't understand, and realize he's dead. But at the same time, too, there's no push for emotion and whatnot. And I think he balances it very well.
He does.
And something else that I think balances really well is the tone and the flow of this movie. This movie really has a lot of long scenes and a lot of long takes with its characters and really takes its time to build the story. But it goes at such a pace that you don't feel the runtime. Like it's an hour and 50 minutes long. And it doesn't feel like that. Whereas some movies you might be watching at that runtime with the kind of scenes that are in this movie, and you're like, man, this feels like it's 4 hours long. How long are we sitting here through this? But no, I think it's just the way the movie builds its entire story of really a simple premise of a doctor trying to understand a young child who might have some sort of disorder or some sort of mental illness, even that he just doesn't relate to his classmates and can't get through to his mom at all. And then you add this high concept of, oh, in fact, he sees dead people walking around the streets that no one else can see. It's like everything builds, and then when you get to the final twist with Mr. Bruce Willis, it's like your mind is trying to wrap up everything that you've been through, because it really starts off as this, opening of the movie is this really charming love story with Bruce Willis and his wife, and then you get all of a sudden this huge tonal change of they're in the bedroom getting hot and heavy, and there's the window's broken and a shadow walks by the bathroom. You're like, okay, this really turned really fast. Of we're having this kind of melancholy opening, and then all of a sudden, nope, there's a man in your bathroom, and he is just hanging out in his skivvies.
Yeah,
and I would just like to point out that the man in the bathroom and whatnot is I do remember the very first time when I saw this in the theater, when you're not kind of paying attention to the credits at the beginning, and then when you see the name at the end and whatnot, you're really going like, where was this guy in the movie? And then you realize that he's the one that plays Vincent Gray. It's like, you look at we have a new kid on the block in this movie, and you would never have realized it because he is so not what you expect. He's not the buff, boy bander that and this is where it's like, okay, Donnie Wahlberg has got some chops when it comes to acting and whatnot. Even just that little bit of the scene of, what little bit he's in the movie just helps escalate that, scene to its absolute fullest.
Yeah.
again, something that could have been stunt casting of having a new kid on the block playing a bit role in this movie is not that, because he's so convincing and so captivating in that one scene that he has in this movie. It's like, where was that performance from his brother in the other M. Night movie? Come on, Mark.
I will say, from a piece of trivia, whatever, that I heard about that specific is that the day that they went to go film that scene was the first time that Willis had met with them to do that scene and whatnot. When Donnie Wahlberg met with M. Night Shyamalan, he looked like what you expect to see as Donnie Wahlberg, right? It was after he was cast and put in whatever. He went through the process of losing the weight and basically uglying himself up. And the day of shooting was the first time M. Night had seen him look like that. Because Donnie's like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go all in for it. And I think that just goes to show that, he's like, because you're absolutely right. He probably could have been like, I'm Donnie Wahlberg, but he's gonna give that performance, but also try to keep it so he's not overshadowing, the true stars of this and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he's not taking you out of the movie, that the fact that it's Donnie Wahlberg, because again, like, if you watch the movie and you know who Donnie Wahlberg is, you might not recognize him right away, really, and especially with the character he's playing. Yeah,
I didn't. It was when the credits roll, you start seeing names. You're like, where the hell was Donnie Wahlberg in this movie? And then you go back, you're like, holy shit.
Well, I mean, it's Donnie Wahlberg, but it's long after the success of New Kids on the Block. You're talking about like 7 to 8 years since the last time they released an album. So, I mean, him trying to show up in like a boy band persona would have been ridiculous.
Showing up in the wife beater and the sideways hat.
Yep. Joey McIntyre's in the other room waiting to kill someone else.
Jordan Knight's downstairs.
It's the New Kids on the Block home invasion film. Because you were home.
We don't know what was going on in those other 3 rooms.
It's true.
That's the real twist of the movie.
Jonathan Knight's like, I'm out.
Well, I think one other notable thing about that character and Haley Joel Osment's character is that they had basically the same diagnosis, which is why I think that like this was Bruce Willis's thing he needed to do before he could leave the world, was do right by Haley Joel Osment's character in a way that he didn't by this other character. So.
Right, exactly. Kind of a way to be able to give him closure.
Yeah, because the way that he remembered it, he remembered like certain terms about disturbed and threat to classmates or whatever, and you saw those terms circled on the sheet that he was reading about Haley. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's such an effective way to open this movie, of kind of giving, in a way, you kind of give, again, it's a flashback, but it's also, maybe this is also a future of what Haley Joel Osment's Cole character would be in the future if he does not receive any help from Bruce Willis in this. What does that character become, as an adult, of not being able to deal with some of these issues that he's having, and not being able to speak to his mom, and really finding the only way to speak with anyone freely is with his psychologist. And that's something, again, you don't expect Bruce Willis to be able to pull off, and he does that incredibly well, of relating to this young child, of being able to understand them on a, like, he's not talking down to Haley Joel Osment as a kid. He treats him like an adult, and I think that's why you need such a dynamic performance from Haley Joel Osment of, you are a kid and you're still going to have childlike qualities, but the stuff you're going through and the interactions you're going to have with Bruce Willis, those are far from being a normal child. You're going to have to up your level to his. And again, both actors pull that off incredibly well in this movie. And again, like that opening, you don't expect the twist at that point.
Right.
By the end of the movie, you're like, okay, what's it say? Like that fall, or later that fall, or the next fall, is when we pick up the movie again. And you're like, okay, Bruce Willis just got shot in the stomach. He survived. He's moving on. We're moving forward. There might be some tension between him and his wife after that situation. That's probably what's going on. And then him putting too much time into his work. That's kind of a trope we've seen in a lot of movies, of the guy puts too much time in his work. His wife feels neglected, and maybe finds another man along the way. And M. Night playing with those tropes is really interesting in this movie.
Plus, there's also that trope from Last Action Hero that basically, if you don't get shot in the head in a movie, people assume that you survive.
Especially if it's PG-13.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he does a masterful job of playing with audience expectations and tropes and showing you what's happening without you ever making the connection until the second time that you watch it. Because at the end of the movie, you look back and it's like, how did I miss this? This must have been obvious from the start. And that's like a magic trick that, for every movie with a twist, maybe 1 in 50 can pull it off to that level.
Right. And that's why I like the little Easter eggs that he gives throughout and whatnot. Like I said, I mean, just for like the sake of the color red, if you're not paying attention or don't realize it, you're like, oh, no big deal. He's got a fancy house. Of course, he's going to have a weird red doorknob to his downstairs office kind of thing. It's you don't think nothing of it that that he has a blanket fort that's got a big red blanket on it. No big deal, whatnot. But it's agreed. It's one of those things that those Easter eggs are laid out, and you're like, oh, now I can start putting the connections together once you kind of get to the end and you get to that reveal.
So let's jump into, since you brought up the red blanket, let's jump into some of the afterlife parts of this movie, the ghostly material, especially right away when we get introduced to Cole and his mom, of all the doors in the kitchen being opened. That's such a great, I don't want to say easy scare. It's not an easy scare, but it's not a jump scare either. It's such an effective scare is the term I'm looking for. Of you follow,
it's a psychological scare.
Yeah, and it's not like big bombastic musical score comes up after the doors are open. It's just it's such a simple scare of you start with Haley Joel Osment in the kitchen and the mom's talking to him and he's just eating a cereal. The camera follows her into the laundry room, and then when she walks back out, we have the same shot, but all the cupboards are open and all the drawers are open. He's still just sitting there. It's like that's such an incredible scare that even today, it's hard for filmmakers to pull that off in a I don't want to say actual horror movie, but a movie that's intending to scare you. Whereas this one just really has supernatural elements, and M. Night's like, yeah, well, I'm also going to scare the crap out of you with it.
Yeah. You don't hear anything. You don't hear any drawers opening or anything. You don't hear any rustling at all. You just come back and it's just like blows up right in your face. It's amazing.
And I think it goes back to Haley Joel Osment's performance, though, too, because when we come back, everything's open and whatnot. And like you said, he's just sitting there, but he's not just sitting there just nonchalantly, whatever. He's literally like the ghost of terror over his face, hands, palms, on the table and whatnot. And it's just, he's so basically scared in his own skin. He doesn't want to move, he basically doesn't say a word until mom starts talking to him. He's just like, I don't know how to respond to this.
Yeah. I mean, what conclusion are you supposed to come to? That ghosts came in and opened all of it? No, you just rationalize, okay, somehow he must have done this.
And then when you get to why, it's, again, you kind of, in any other horror movie, your kids might be scared of the ghosts, but they also might be really intrigued by it or trying to edge it on, trying to pull something out of it. Whereas here, he's just downright terrified that he sees all these people and no one else does around him, and no one will believe him either. And the terror that is just present even before you ever see a ghost in this movie is, you feel for this kid already. You're like, that's terrifying. If I was the same age he is, yeah, I would be terrified out of my skull too. Of seeing dead people in my school, seeing people hanging there, seeing people in your house.
What's the hanging people? Is that the first ghosts that you actually see when you're watching the movie?
Yes, the ones in the school, and because up to that point you're like, does he really see dead people? Because we're not really led onto it and whatnot until all of a sudden he just stops dead in his tracks and whatnot, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, so it isn't a psychological thing; it's an actual spirit thing and whatnot. To the point where we start to lean that shift into, what do we believe and what don't we believe?
And even throughout the movie, that same trend of people not believing him and him seeing something there kind of plays out throughout the movie. It starts with Bruce Willis in the school there, where he sees the 3 bodies hanging up in the hallway. And this comes after him explaining what his school used to be to his teacher, which again, the teacher dynamic is also really great in this movie. Of he knows the teacher's secret of having a stutter when he was a kid. He also knows that the school used to be a courthouse and they used to hang people there. Again,
a fire.
Yeah, and there was a fire, and all these things that he knows and no one else will believe, and that's a trend that continues throughout the movie, even with that final emotional scene between him and his mom where they're stuck in traffic after an accident, and he basically explains to his mom of, no, something really bad happened, someone died there, and she's like, well, how can you see it? What happened? He's like, no, they're standing right outside my window, and it just cuts to the woman with the bicycle gear on right behind him, just covered in blood. You're like, that's such a great scare in this movie, while also being part of the drama as well. And I think that's something like any modern horror movies, or I would say any horror movies in the history of the horror genre, it's hard to pull that off, and M. Night really does it very well because it's wrapped up in the drama first and foremost.
Yeah. I will say one thing about for the aspect of the school and the history of the school and whatnot. The one part, like, I'm not quite sure where or how he was going about this, but like you made the comment about the teacher's stutter and his secret and whatnot, right? Like, the kid knows we hung people here because he sees the ghosts hanging. You know, he knew about the fire because the ghost that helped him during the play, that was the burn victim. Like, he sees that ghost and whatnot. What ghost is telling him about Stanley's stutter? About there's no connection to that other than the fact that he's like, I know how I can push my teacher's buttons.
Was the fire when his teacher was in school?
Yeah, like,
and so I think the teacher gave the burn victim teacher maybe gave him both of that information. Because that's kind of the way I read it.
That would be my assumption.
But he wasn't. That whole part of it doesn't happen before he's into the play yet.
True. There's probably, you have to assume that there are other ghosts in that school, and maybe they filled them in. I don't know. It's maybe a plot hole, but
we see that burn victim before that scene, right?
No,
I don't know.
I swear we do.
No, because that's why.
Isn't she the one in the house that he thinks is the mom?
No, that's
when she's in the kitchen.
No, because that's the lady who cut herself and committed suicide.
That's right. So no, I guess we don't. I would assume it's probably the teacher told him both of those things, and he's seen the teacher before.
And that's one of the things I actually do like about this is, it's not uncommon for movies in general to have plot holes or whatnot.
Yeah.
Or it's not unusual for M. Night to have plot holes. But this is one of those few movies where it's really hard to find a plot hole because for the most part, everything has to pay off by the end. We get those little nuggets across, whatever the case is, and you can start connecting the dots once you get to the end and whatnot. So, honestly, I mean, for the most part, that's really the only part while watching this movie going, I can't tie that up. Everything else kind of has its little thing. I mean, we get reminiscence of different ghosts and things and people that he sees and whatnot that we don't get any backstory. We don't get anything going forward about it. Like, for instance, like the kid who shoots himself kind of thing. Don't know. That's the only time we ever see him. There's nothing before, nothing after, whatever the case is. It's just basically giving us the proof that he does in fact see, dead people and whatnot. But, we get the follow through with like Misha Barton and the sick girl and everything like that, So, I mean, for the most part, those that of those things that needed to be told get to be told, and we get the end game with everything.
So I want to touch on the scene with his tent fort and the girl who is vomiting in it. That's the scene when I was a kid that scarred me for life.
Yeah, as an adult going to go see this, you're like, it's stuff like that to me feels very much like his homage to like The Exorcist, but doing it his way. But to the point where you're like, I don't want to. If that is creepy enough for me, I don't want to watch The Exorcist.
And there's 3 incredible scares in that one scene too. It's the clothespins getting unclipped right above him, and you just see them come off one by one. You're like, oh shit, what's happening? And then when he looks down, he sees the girl start vomiting in his tent. It's like, oh my god, that's terrifying. And then when he runs out, he knocks the blankets over, and it's just this silhouette of a person standing under the blanket. You're like, dude, you just pulled off 3 incredible scares in the matter of like 30 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
And like 6 or 7-year-old me was like, this is the most terrifying thing ever. I'm gonna build a blanket for it, and some little girl's gonna be puking in it.
He's over there watching the movie through his fingers.
I legit don't know if I finished the movie when we watched it that time. After that scene, I was like, nope, I'm done.
That's the kind of thing where you're like, I'm gonna go downstairs. I'm gonna go watch my cartoons.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, again, that's just one scare, and again, that one pays off in such an emotional way too. Of the scene with the father. Of again, I think later Shyamalan. I don't know if the actor in that role would have been able to pull it off, because M. Night likes to pull some weird acting choices out of his actors in small bit roles like that in his later movies, or it would have been M. Night himself being in that role.
Yeah.
So the fact that he is able to pull off such an emotional scene with a character we've never met before that interaction is a kind of the magic trick of this movie. So I think it's just incredible performances throughout this movie. Like, there's no one bad. There's no one bad in this movie.
No,
not even M. Night. Not even M. Night.
Granted, at least M. Night keeps his down to like the 2-minute scene that he's got and whatnot. M. Night doesn't give himself a chance to make it bad.
And that's the stuff I like to see him in, of playing like one scene where he delivers like 5 lines of dialogue. And you're like, okay, that's good. You were good in that part.
Yep.
I don't know if we need any more of you in this movie.
M. Night, look at your character list. Who is like 4th or 5th or 6th wrong? That's where we need to put you at. Even if it means that we're going to put you in as a character that has no lines.
Yeah.
Just walk on, do your thing, walk off. That's what you need to do.
Yeah. All right, Darren, what do you think of Mr. Shyamalan's scene in this movie? Do you think this is more apropos for Mr. Shyamalan in these type of smaller roles in his movies?
Definitely. The more he casts himself in the role, the worse it usually is. There's a tradition of big name directors inserting themselves into movies. Goes back to Hitchcock. Tarantino does it all the time. But M. Night Shyamalan's not a particularly good actor, and he kind of lets his ego run out of control, like in Lady in the Water, where he's like the writer who saves the world. Yeah. But the smaller the cameo, the better. I mean, if you're going to insist on doing that, you should probably have a reason to be there, or at the very least, just be like a Stan Lee type cameo.
Well, you went in one direction. I was just about to go the other. I was about to be like, okay, if you're going to put yourself in extensively in your movie, he needs just to be a silent bomb, to the point where it's like, I'm going to be in my movie, but I have no dialogue.
or a Hitchcock, where he's like, blink and you miss him.
Right.
Exactly.
That's why it's like in some of these movies, you're kind of playing the Stan Lee game of, where is M. Night? Where is he going to show up in this movie? Last week we didn't even get him. Yeah. But yeah, this is. I mean, that's been a trend for his entire career. I mean, he was the star of his first feature length movie himself. Like, he was the star of the movie. So it's been a trend for M. Night to just put himself in the movie, and that's kind of the good and the bad of M. Night's entire career, of in a nutshell, in a way, of kind of, he is inserting himself into his movie, whether that's good or bad, kind of will just depend on the movie. And this is one of those that doesn't stand out as one of the really fun M. Night ones, but it's a nice subtle one to, hey, I want to be in my own movie. I'll do this one little scene where I'm playing a doctor, and that's it.
Well, plus at this point, it hadn't become a trope in his movies yet. It hadn't become
No.
like the thing that he does every single time. So what's he going to do this time? So at this point, it's just like, okay, well, he happens to be in. And at this point, people don't know what M. Night Shyamalan looks like. So he could just.
That's what I was going to say. We're watching this, and we don't know it's M. Night until the credits roll.
Yeah.
Right. But by the time you get around to Signs or The Visit, then it's just like, or Signs or The Village, you know who M. Night Shyamalan is because he's like this superstar director. And so now him inserting himself into the movie, well, he always puts himself in an important role.
Mm-hmm.
So if he says something like in Signs, it probably means something. And yeah, doesn't always work.
Let's jump to I want to jump to the Toni Collette scene at the end of this movie and talk about her a little bit more. Because I think, again, when people talk about The Sixth Sense, and in the last 20 plus years, how many times people have talked about it, it's always Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment that are usually the two big talking points right away in terms of the acting category. And we touched on Donnie Wahlberg, and I think he's brought up quite a bit too of being like, holy shit, Donnie Wahlberg's in this movie and he's really good. And then there's Toni Collette, who kind of is like flying under the radar in this movie of giving maybe the best performance out of it, because she is just incredible in this movie of playing the single mom who just cannot get through to her son at all, does not understand him in the slightest, but you can tell that love is still there between the mother and the son, and she just does not know how to express it until that final scene in the car between the two, where he tells his mom about her mother visiting him constantly, and about the story of the grandma showing up to was it a play
recital.
she was in, or a recital?
Dance recital.
And just saying, like, she didn't ever tell Toni Collette that she was there, but that she was proud of her and she was watching her. And it's kind of this nice little moment in this movie of, and in a way of kind of the thing we always hear when someone passes, they might be gone, but they're always with you. They're always watching you. And that's kind of in the actual, not even in a metaphor of physically, no, they're there with you all the time in this case, and they're always going to be with you. Of having that reassurance for Toni Collette is kind of her big character moment of knowing her mom that we just assumed she was very close with, but also had this kind of tumultuous relationship with, of kind of being able to move on past that now.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we see so many different things, almost kind of like her kind of reliving through like the levels of grief while he's telling this story. She starts to kind of get a little bit of the glimmer when she's looking at the photos while she's cleaning, that she's noticing all of the light refractions and all that stuff, which obviously we're going to assume is going to be grandma. But it's at that very end when she has that look of disbelief in him, like, oh, what's this? You're saying that you see dead people and whatnot, about the whole the lady up at the front who died in the car accident and whatnot. But then he brings up the bumblebee or the pendant thing and whatnot, and she's like, okay, why are we going over this again? I know you keep taking it, you just keep lying to me, until he starts going through the story of something that she knows obviously he would have no knowledge of whatsoever. And you just literally see that click in her of just almost anger into the compassion and the understanding, and just all of the emotion that she's getting from the story that's being told to her, that she's basically reliving. And no, I agree. It's one of those ones, like, Toni Collette's name popped up on the screen when I went to go watch this, and I'm like, honestly, I completely forgot that she was even in this, because you're right. I remembered more of Donnie Wahlberg being in this more than her, and that's not to take away from her performance at all, by all means, and whatnot. But it's one of those ones where, like, for me, like, the resurgence of Toni Collette, like, right now, is what's making me going, oh crap, there's all this great performance and this great performance, that, like, you're absolutely right, Casey. It's like, she's absolutely stunning in all the work that she does, but she just lies underneath that, like, that weird, right underneath the radar, where she doesn't, I don't think necessarily gets 100% all the recognition that she probably deserves, but is able to still have the name for herself, that you pull up and like, oh, I want to see that because Toni Collette is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
She in a way kind of reminds me of Frances McDormand because Frances gets the awards usually whenever she delivers a big performance like this. Whereas Toni Collette doesn't, but they still have that same vibe to them of just being incredible actresses that kind of fly under the radar when you think of the greatest actresses of all time. They are in that category of you need to talk about them. And kind of in any movie that you talk about, there might be something else you talk about a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Because I think they're just this inherent core to the movies that they appear in. Like when you think of Fargo, like she might not be the first person you think of, but she's like the inherent core of that movie. Same with like Toni Collette in this movie. She's the emotional core by the end of it. But you always think of Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment first. And then it's kind of this weird anomaly that they fall into. Like, why wouldn't we think of them first?
Yeah.
No, I agree. You're going France. Granted, me, France Smith is the first thing I think of a Fargo, but
yeah. That and the wood chipper.
I was going to say I think of the wood chipper first,
but she's there in the wood chipper scene.
Yeah.
I think
I've never seen it.
Oh wow! But her big scene at the end is basically, I think she's great throughout, but the big scene at the end is what got her the Academy Award nomination. It reminds me of all things of Michael Stuhlbarg, I think is his name, his performance in Call Me by Your Name. It's just like he was getting buzzed to be a best supporting candidate, and you never really understood why until you saw that last scene that he has with his son, and then it's like, oh my God, he should win. And Toni Collette is, I think at some point she's going to get the recognition that she deserves. She's going to win the awards. She just needs the right role. Like Frances McDormand has 3 Oscars now, and it's because she's had 3 Oscar caliber roles. So it's just a matter of Toni Collette being in the right role in the right movie. Now, if the Oscars didn't have that prejudice against horror movies, which they genuinely do, I think she was probably the best performance that year for Hereditary by far. I mean, in all the ways that she's a compassionate, loving mother in this movie, she's the exact opposite in that movie, and it's just on a dime. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's not a matter of if, but when that happens. And again, it's just going to take the right year. I think pretty much every Collette performance is a banger performance. It's just going to take that right year where something else is like a Frances McDormand and Amy Adams aren't going to be in a movie that year for her to finally win.
Wow, Amy Adams hasn't won anything yet anyway.
And Meryl Streep. Don't forget, you got to take Meryl Streep. You got to take her.
Can't forget the street monster. She'll sneak in there.
They were talking about nominating her for The Prom last year.
I think anytime Meryl Streep's name comes up on a cast list, they immediately are like, "There's the Oscar-winning performance."
Did she get nominated for the Into the Woods?
She did nominated for
Why?
I think she has 14 nominations, so it's just like it became a thing where if she's in a movie.
I think she's got like 14 wins. I think she's got more nominations than that.
She has more wins than nominations, period.
No, she has 3 wins. Steve Martin made a famous Oscars joke about how Meryl Streep was our most nominated Oscar candidate, but in another way, our biggest loser.
All right, let's go into. Do you guys have any other scenes or any other tidbits you guys want to throw in there?
One other great performance. I don't remember the actor's name, but he is the father. When he's watching that the video of his the daughter recorded for him, that is like such a heartbreaking wave of emotion that goes over him because he's elated to see his daughter and she's having fun, and then she moves the puppet box away and the camera is focusing on her and she sees what the mother is doing, and it's just devastating because not only is that how his daughter died, but she was apparently doing it to the other daughter as well. And seeing the Munchausen by proxy, I think it's called, in action and realizing what his wife was and what happened to his children was just so heartbreaking because the camera is focused on him like the entire time while he's watching it happening. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost the look on his face. Either you have a very, very great actor, or they're showing him something so sad to pull off that emotion.
Yeah,
in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing I want to bring up before we get to final thoughts is the classmate of Haley Joel Osment's character of Cole, the kid who was in the one commercial and thinks he's hot shit now, and especially this.
I love the fact that we get that commercial though.
Oh,
too.
and it's incredible. It's awesome.
Doesn't he throw his shoe at the TV or something?
And that's where, like, I think an unsung thing people don't talk about in The Sixth Sense is the humor M. Night still throws in this movie, especially with the scene of the couple looking at the ring with Bruce Willis's wife. It's like, why is that scene in this movie? But it's also really quirky, and like only M. Night does those kind of scenes in these movies. Of we didn't really need that, but it's a quirky, fun scene that is really kind of disorienting too because of the way he shoots it. It's like that's an M. Night scene. Like you look at that and you can tell immediately who directed that. You're like, oh, M. Night Shyamalan directed that there. But the other scene with the classmate I want to bring up is the scene where they have the birthday party and they lock him in like the quote unquote dungeon room. Yeah. And you don't see anything in there. You just know that Haley Joel Osment's locked in there and he has seen something, and he's screaming his head off and wants to get out of there. It's like, it's scary again. It's scarier to think of what is behind that door than for M. Night to ever show us what was in there.
Jaws alien dynamic.
And the one thing that's great about that scene too is like we've mentioned about his ability to direct kids, as well as the performance that Osment was giving for this role. Is he's on the other side, and there is a true sound of terror in his voice. Like, at that age, it could be like, you just want to make it sound like you're bumping around and anything and, yelling and screaming, whatever the case is. Like, you can feel the terror coming out of his voice and whatnot. And I think that, not every kid at that age would have been able to pull off that, how terrifying he sounds in that little room.
Yeah, his friend who was in the commercial probably couldn't pull it off. He was a one-hit wonder with that.
Classic stage kid.
I love the fact that they're just standing there like, what's going on, dude? You just lock him in there. Maybe you should get him out.
Yeah. We all know those kids, and and I think that goes into again the underlying story of he sees dead people and kind of makes him the strange kid, but in real life, if that bullying type of thing happens, he's still going to act kind of the way he does in this movie too, where I think M. Night pulls off that nice little balance between supernatural and just our reality in this movie. So
he makes all the crazy things that happen in his movies plausible in a context of normal life that could either be something supernatural or something that we could all explain. And we, as the audience, trick ourselves into thinking that things are normal until we actually start hearing about he sees dead bodies, and then you actually start to see them and realize it's telling the truth. Yeah.
And what we have very interesting is at the beginning of this, he's scared of the ghost. And obviously by the time we get to the end of the film, he's no longer scared of the ghost. He understands what his purpose is, everything like that, which is the point where as much as Casey likes to give me crap, as much as I enjoy my Fast and Furious sequels that have been going on for 20 years, is this would be one of those ones I would be curious to see is if it was something that if M. Night would revisit Haley Joel Osment's his character, and the things that he does as somebody who can reach out to these ghosts and everything like that, and basically be like a ghost whisperer, if you will, just to see is where did this kid become? So, that we see that he didn't have the same path as Vincent. That he was a different path.
There is the pseudo sequel, The Frighteners, which of course I think came out before this movie, but
a couple years. And I will, for a Peter Jackson movie, I will die on that sword. I love that movie.
Oh, I love that. It's a great movie. I'm just saying it would be funny if he grew up and became a con artist who worked with the ghosts. But no, this is definitely the type of movie that maybe somewhere down the line you could make a Dr. Sleep type of movie, based on his story. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, especially in the fact that we're talking how many years down the road, and now that Haley Joel Osment is an adult and whatnot, now is a good time to be able to cast the same person you had, and to potentially retell that, or not retell, but to expand upon that story.
Yeah.
guys, let's not put any ideas in M. Night's head. He'll do this, and it'll be horrible. And I will still love
that's
it.
kind of the other part of it. It's like there's a risk that if he makes a sequel, that it might lower the value of the original as well. I mean, that's happened quite a bit.
And I think for him,
or do
Not
we
him
get somebody,
specifically, but in general.
Do we get somebody else to do it since
No.
this is
No.
a Disney property and whatnot? Well, you know,
Oh.
I'm only throwing this out here, Casey. For as much as you enjoy Doctor Sleep, you know, and the fact that it's not a Kubrick movie,
Right.
you know, but it's something that it's a nice, wonderful extension without diminishing the original.
But it is a Stephen King story.
Mm-hmm. And they're both based off books.
Yeah. That's the tricky thing.
My thing is I wouldn't trust M. Night enough to pull off something that'll hold up at least to The Sixth Sense, because no one else is touching this. This is still to this day, this is M. Night's baby right here. This is what he holds near and dear out of all of his movies. The Sixth Sense is his baby. This is his movie. He still talks about how this movie has impacted his entire life. Like, even I was watching a behind the scenes thing on signs, and he's like talking about different signs like in his own life that have kind of led him down this path. And he's like, the number 6 has always been a very important number to me, obviously for a movie that I directed in the past, especially. So this is his baby. I would love to see him maybe do like a novel or a screenplay of what's the sequel to The Sixth Sense. What is Cole's character doing nowadays? I think that'd be really cool. And having
maybe
you could still have M. Night's voice be a part of that, and Haley Joel Osment. Maybe have Haley Joel be able to do some of the dialogue with Cole's character there.
Maybe.
But let's get into our final thoughts on The Sixth Sense, and not give any ideas to M. Night on The Seventh Sense.
Seventh Sense.
Yeah. I think this is Signs is my favorite M. Night movie, but I think The Sixth Sense is still his best movie. I think from beginning to end, this is just one of the great movies of the last 25 years. One of the great original movies that we've had, and that's quarter of a century there. And it's one of those movies that has defined his career, has defined Haley Joel Osment's career. It's what they're going to be. That's what their legacy is going to leave behind, is this movie, and what a legacy to leave behind. This is one of the great modern movies, and one that works as a horror movie, as a drama, has those M. Night quirks still sprinkled in, not as much as they do a little bit later on in his career, like in Signs or The Village or The Happening, but it's still there. It's enough of those M. Night little sprinkles are in this kind of for this perfect blend of the pinnacle of M. Night's best.
Mm-hmm. You know, the one thing I will certainly say about this movie is, to me, it doesn't feel like it's definitely a ghost story, and it definitely has a little bit of the scare tactic, whatever. But to me, it never really felt as like horror, like flat out horror movie. It just for me, it almost felt more of a dramatic ghost storytelling with a little bit of a horror tied to it, more than an actual horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a perfect movie. I think that M. Night Shyamalan is a great director. He doesn't always make great movies. In fact, Roger Ebert once said that in order to make a truly terrible movie, you need a great director, and M. Night Shyamalan's proven that quite a bit. But this movie he knocks it out of the park. Everything that he's ever done right, he does right in this movie. Everything he's ever done wrong, he avoids. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's got some of the most amazing performances I've ever seen. It hits the right tone, it hits the right emotions, it hits everything just straight out of the park. It's easily one of the best movies of the last quarter century, and I think that it's worth it that he's managed to basically continue making films, even if they have lost a lot of money or not been very good, based on the possibility that his next movie might be this good, because I think he's one of the great filmmakers of his generation, but he also has some really bad instincts to get over. And in this movie, he proved that he could do everything perfectly under the right circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question. If you were to pair The Sixth Sense with another movie for a double feature, what's the movie you are going to pair it with?
I would pair it with the other great Haley Joel Osment performance and go with AI, artificial intelligence.
Brian, what about you?
All of a sudden, I was like, "What years?" But Darren's over here going like the great performance. Like, where are we going with this here?
It's like, are we going to Tusk already? All right.
I legit want to go
forward.
To Tusk. I want to go to Tusk. I do. I do. I'm like, you know what? Just for the sake of humor is, hey, let's get young Haley Joel Osment. Let's get old Haley Joel Osment. Let's go throw out some walrus. I'm completely okay with that. And I actually really enjoy Tusk. Mm-hmm. So,
actually, Michael Park's performance in that movie, I say, is just as great as a lot of performances, including the ones in The Sixth Sense. So, yeah.
Michael Park should have gotten some nominations for Tusk. I'm just saying.
They're not gonna nominate Tusk for any award.
No. Of course not. They look at Kevin. They're like, Kevin Smith movie, pass.
Oh, Chasing Amy got nominations.
What's that?
Chasing Amy got nominations and attention.
Yeah, but that was also 25 years ago.
Well, yeah.
And Justin Long's not sewn into a walrus suit in that movie.
Oh, I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it.
The one I'm going to go with, The Sixth Sense first, and then I'm going to follow it up with another movie about a kid and ghosts. I'm going to go with a director that I kind of, in a way, compare his horror style to M. Night's horror style, is James Wan. So I'm going to go with Insidious. Kind of a different horror ghost take as well with that movie and this one. Kind of both with kids as the centerpiece with great adult performances in there as well.
I kind of thought you were going to go with Poltergeist.
That's another good one. Yeah.
That was literally the first thing that was on the top of my head was this and Poltergeist, and then he started talking about Haley Joel Osment's great performances. I'm like, well, I'm going to just change my answer.
Oh, you thought I was going to say Tusk, I assume, right?
No. Well,
well, when I saw your reaction, I thought you were reacting to me saying like AI is a good movie. So I don't know what your take on that is.
I don't know. You could also get Haley Joel Osment and Yoga Hosers.
I said good movie.
Was that even a movie?
Oh, I don't even think so. I hate that one so much. That's unwatchable, man. I love Kevin Smith, but man, Yoga Hosers.
I'll watch me some Bratzies any day.
Oh man.
Anyway, we went from the positive high of The Sixth Sense to Yoga Hosers. This is
wow.
Yes. Hey, at least there's a through line with Haley Joel Osment.
There sure is. And hey, guess what? Guess who Kevin Smith does not like? Bruce Willis. He's in this movie. So that's how we come full circle from The Sixth Sense to Kevin Smith all the way back. So again, this has been our episode on The Sixth Sense. We're going to jump into our plugs for the show and everything we have coming up here. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and hey, we're on YouTube as well. Just simply search Backlot 605 in any of those places where you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd HQ, all at Backlot 605. On Facebook, we also have the South Dakota Film Community Group, film lovers, filmmakers, film enthusiasts. Everybody just like to get together and just have a good conversation and talk about movies.
Mm-hmm. And with that, the South Dakota Film Community Group meetup will be meeting up here again as this episode is dropping on August 25th. We're going to be having our monthly meetup at Full Circle Book Co-op tonight, the 25th of August at 8 p.m. Full Circle Book Co-op downtown Sioux Falls. So stop on out, grab a beer, grab a drink, and join in a night of conversation about movies. And we also got a plug where you can gets a little extra seasoning on your Backlot 605 pizza. That's where you can find it on patreon.com/Backlot 605. You get weekly bonus episodes on there. So again, patreon.com/Backlot 605. We are going to be having our episode on Don't Breathe 2 coming out this week, followed by Candyman the week after. So that'll be coming up.
Candyman.
That'll be coming up very shortly on there. And then special thanks to our patrons. Darren, hey, you're one of them. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We also got to give a shout out to Logan, Blake, Andy, Derek, Lou, Corey, and John for being patrons on the show. Thank you guys so much. We have some fun stuff coming up next month with our Patreon bonus episodes there. But I guess we should jump into our announcement for next month since we are wrapping up M. Night Shyamalan month here this week. We're going to be kicking off a little series that we are tying into SuperCon because SuperCon is coming back in person. Heroes Homecoming, the first weekend of October. We're going to be there. Hey, we're going to be presenting the first ever SuperCon Film Festival there. So we're going to kind of tie the entire month of September into that as we're going to be talking about the best, or just some of, the non-comic book superhero movies. So superhero movies that have been released that are not directly related to a comic book. And we're going to kick it off with one next week, actually directed by Mr. M. Night Shyamalan.
The only time I think that we've had a segue into one series into another series like this.
Paul Blart would be proud of this segue because we are doing Unbreakable next week.
Nice.
We could not do an M. Night series without it, but we found a way to sneak it in. We're killing two birds with one stone. That's our twist.
Right. There you go. Is that twist?
That is our twist. So Unbreakable next week on Backlot 605, kicking off non-comic book superhero month. And then I'm going to throw it off to Darren. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? Plug your Twitter. Plug anywhere else people can find you on the interwebs.
Well, most of what I do is on Twitter. It's HINESD24, HeinsD24. At Twitter, I have a daily directors poll. I nominate 3 directors and basically have like a mock Hall of Fame where basically I, the voters pick a different director every day, and that's my banner and profile page on my Twitter account. I review on Letterboxd at HeinsE24, HINESY24. And I'm currently running a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame project called Rock Hall Reconsidered. And I'm running that on Twitter with my friend Nick Bombach. It's basically, we're redoing that on a week-by-week basis. We go forward 1 year, and anyone who's interested in becoming a voter can just send me a notice on Twitter or on HeinsD24@gmail.com, and we'll get you on the ballot.
Awesome.
Right on. Yeah, go check out Darren on Twitter. I always like to see those polls come up, and it's always interesting to see what 3 directors you throw up against each other. Yeah. I'm like, all right. Who do I vote for? That's the big question. So yeah, definitely go check that out. Yeah, I don't think that we have anything else for house cleaning. Like I said, kicking off non-comic book superhero month next week with Unbreakable. So go give that movie a nice rewatch. But until next time, once again, Darren Hines, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Definitely going to have you back very, very soon. And for Brian Mensing, I am Casey Kelderman. We will check you all out next time on the Backlot of South Dakota. What a twist!